You know, Formula One's in a weird place when the most realistic part of the weekend is Max doing a full 360 and somehow still recovering better than the FIA's credibility. Quick apology for the delay, legends. Partly thanks to Grok being strangled harder than Oscar's strategy calls, but mostly because I was unsuccessfully hunting down mysteriously missing radio audio. You know, the conveniently absent kind that might explain why Oscar didn't pit when he was first told to, and importantly, when he actually needed to. And somehow, Lando's radio has missing chunks from the exact same moment too. Totally normal. Definitely not suspicious. Just your standard McLando transparency package. Too much of a coincidence, mate. Welcome to Miami 2026, where the racing is powered by batteries, the narratives are powered by marketing, and the stewards seem to be powered by interpretive dance. The commentary team continues its brave mission to convince us that what we're watching is absolutely, definitely, totally real racing. Spoiler alert, it isn't. But don't worry. According to the Sheep team, if you're not enjoying this season's thrilling combination of battery management, tire nursing, and strategic beige, that's not because the racing is rubbish. It's because you're just too stupid to understand it. Yep. This episode contains sarcasm, dry Australian humour, dangerous levels of pattern recognition, and strategic suspicion. If symptoms persist, please consult your nearest Liberty Media-approved propaganda specialist. G'day legends, Papaya Koala here. Welcome back to the Formula Battery Grand Prix Miami 2026, where we watch Formula One ask awkward questions and occasionally notice things the commentary team would very much prefer we didn't. And yes, the McLando files are open again, because somehow, despite all assurances to the contrary, the exact same shenanigans that helped gift Lando an utterly undeserved title last year appear to be alive and well. But before we get to the race, we need to talk about the broadcast, because the Sheep team are trying very hard to convince us that this is great racing. The broadcast literally opens with, "Welcome back to the real Formula One racing." Yes, real racing. That's what they said, but it's not what we saw. What we're watching is Formula One's awkward battery-powered cousin wearing F1's skin like a Halloween costume. Real racing quietly packed its bags a while ago. This is definitely not what Fangio dreamed of. Then they start banging on about the excitement of the pass and repass battles from the opening rounds. Now look, passing alone does not automatically equal exciting racing. Battery-based overtakes are not inherently exciting. They are about as authentic as professional wrestling storylines. Passing because your battery deployment spreadsheet said so is not the same as bravery, skill, or talent. It's Excel with wheels. And yet the Sheep team keeps trying. Bless their hearts. The more the commentary team tries to sell it like it's peak motorsport, the more they start sounding like blokes trying to convince you instant coffee is basically cafe quality. Then, naturally, we get the celebrity parade. Because apparently F1 still believes actual fans tune in hoping to see random actors pretending they know who Charles is. Real fans do not care. At all. But it does explain why these heavily manufactured history boy narratives keep falling flat. Because people can see through them. Lando, despite all the marketing, has become one of the most divisive champions in modern F1. Because fans watched what happened last year, and they didn't like it. At all. And now Kimi, who should be the exciting young rookie everyone naturally supports, is starting to attract backlash too. Not because people hate him, but because fans don't enjoy being told to ignore what they can plainly see. Meanwhile, Oscar, despite the continuing invisibility campaign, keeps becoming more popular. And F1 knows it. Their own socials get better engagement with Oscar images than almost anyone except Max. Because people genuinely like him. And after the McLando circus last year, a lot of fans think Oscar got robbed, which creates a bit of a problem for the approved narrative. Because they can't openly attack Oscar anymore without massive pushback. So instead, they just try not to mention him. Case in point, the broadcast discusses previous Miami winners. They mention Max. They mention Lando. They completely ignore that Oscar was literally the last driver to win in Miami just last year in 2025. Funny omission that. Especially when Miami is the lowest grip track And reminding everyone Oscar dominated there absolutely ruins the Oscar struggles on low-grip circuits narrative. Awkward. Awkward. Now qualifying. Oscar nearly gets dumped in Q1 due to bizarre pit wall inputs. The problems briefly disappear long enough to scrape through, then magically return in Q3. Oscar lights up Sector 2 purple, proper pole lap pace. Then suddenly, Sector 3 falls off a cliff. Massive unexpected power loss. And Oscar very carefully calls it weird and unexpected. Not driver error, not setup, not the car itself, just weird. Ah yes, the technical term for something suspicious happened and we all know it. Even Fat Rat Brown admitted
It wasn't a problem with the car.
well, if it's not Oscar and not the car, that really narrows the field, doesn't it? Snake Stallard strikes again. At this point, the sabotage isn't even subtle anymore. The bloke nearly got Oscar knocked out in Q1 by accident while trying to engineer Lando ahead. That's not villainy. That's incompetence with a headset. So Oscar drops to P7. Lando, with a fairly average qualifying effort, is protected in P4. Funny that. And Stella? Interesting reaction. For once he looked genuinely angry. Confused too. Very carefully making it clear Oscar had done nothing wrong and the issue came from elsewhere. Honestly, Papaya Koala is starting to think it genuinely appeared Stella may not be fully on board with whatever nonsense keeps happening on Oscar's side of the garage this year. Hope? Maybe. I'll reserve judgment for now, because the sabotage ultimately cost the team pole in the race. All just to keep Lando ahead of Oscar. Outstanding teamwork, lads. Lights out. And immediately, Kimi gets another terrible launch. Again, for a supposed generational phenomenon, his starts are surprisingly agricultural and slow. Charles rockets forward. Oscar gets a better launch than Lando and pulls alongside, only for Lando to squeeze him wide as usual, forcing Oscar to back out and lose the place. Then chaos. Max spins. Full 360. Doesn't hit anything. Doesn't hit anyone. Points it forward. Keeps it running. Honestly, one of the most impressive bits of car control we've seen all season. Max drops down the order while everyone scatters like pigeons in a shopping centre car park. Meanwhile, Kimi locks up going too hot into T1, cuts across the runoff, keeps positions he absolutely should have lost, then rejoins in a way that forces Lando to brake. Now, according to the rules, the driver must rejoin safely without impeding or forcing another driver to take evasive action. Lando braking to avoid contact literally fits the definition. Penalty? Of course not. Kimi's driving an Arrow. So apparently Kimi now races under diplomatic immunity, and that rule now exists more as a decorative suggestion. At this stage, Kimi's basically Teflon. Max starts aggressively making his way back through the midfield. Carlos Hare is not thrilled. He pushed me off. He thinks he can do whatever he wants just because he's racing the midfield. Max responds with peak blunt Dutch energy. It is a bit of a jungle in the midfield, so I don't know what to say. Honestly, fair. Lap 6, Isaac bins it into the wall, making the Bulls' second seat curse look more and more real. Then almost immediately, Pierre and Liam tangle, with Pierre ending up awkwardly parked, half on the tyre barrier, like someone abandoned a shopping trolley. Safety car. Oscar nails the restart and immediately repasses George despite George trying the old just run him out of road maneuver. Oscar radios, that was super dangerous by George, clearly using George's own words against him. Snake's response? Yeah, copy, we saw. That's it. No suggestion of reporting it. No concern. Nothing, just, yep, saw it. Incredible support structure there. Right. What's the Snake done now? Oscar reports understeer. Snake's advice? Don't push. Brilliant. Engineering masterclass. Instead of fixing the issue, just drive slower. Problem solved. Drive slower. Not really the best advice for a racer. By lap 21, Snake is talking almost non-stop. Most of it, irrelevant waffle. Oscar's responses become shorter and shorter. Clearly irritated with Snake distraction radio. Then lap 22, box to overtake Charles, box to overtake. Makes sense. Oscar needs tyres and Charles is already pitting. Except he doesn't pit. But strangely, there is no call for him to abort the pit stop. Mysteriously, or is that suspiciously there's just a gap in the radio feed? Same thing on Lando's side. Then suddenly both engineers are discussing weather. Now call me cynical, but both missing radio at the exact strategic moment tends to raise eyebrows. Especially when there was no call to abort the pit stop and yet Oscar did not pit. Especially when the result absolutely destroyed Oscar's race. Because Oscar stays out too long? Clearly, not his choice. The team choosing not to pit Oscar when he was originally supposed to loses him around a second per lap and bleeds 7 seconds plus multiple positions. Meanwhile, Lando gets the clean air he wanted. But in typical Lando fashion, he stays out too long, and it is Lando's own choice. Yes, he wanted the clean air and ended up getting undercut by Kimi instead, which hands Kimi the race. And somehow, this keeps happening. At this point, McLando's strategy resembles less of a race team and more of an internal political campaign. At least Ferroro's strategy fails aren't deliberate. So, congratulations lads, you sabotaged Oscar and still lost. That takes real commitment. Oscar is finally allowed to pit. It's another slow stop. Despite Lando fans' assertion, it is Oscar who has the majority of slow stops. Of course, the commentary doesn't mention it, but once on fresh tires, Oscar gets purple sectors everywhere, cuts back through the field, on-track passes, clean, clinical, gets himself onto the podium despite the strategy nonsense. Honestly, one of the best drives of the race. Snake's back on the radio, and that's rarely good news. Snake keeps desperately trying to engage Oscar, who has gone silent. Oscar, ask us if you need help. Mate, he did ask for help. Earlier, you told him, don't push. Yes, you basically told a race driver to drive slower. Eventually, Snake says, a little desperately, Oscar, our data is a bit patchy. Ask us for help. If you need support with balance in any corners, please ask us for help. Almost as if suddenly realizing that Oscar was justifiably angry and giving minimal answers to his endless irrelevant nattering and setting changes. Oscar isn't as stupid as Snake needs him to be to tolerate what just happened to him with good grace. Again, Snake asks, anything we can help you with? Oscar finally replies, the downshift feels quite bad. Copy. And then offers absolutely no advice whatsoever. None. At all. So why ask? Purely theater at this point. Oscar sounds exhausted, detached, like Alonso's famous Why Bother era circa Spain 2018. You can hear the last of the trust disappearing in real time. And when a driver stops trusting their engineer, that relationship is cooked. Papaya Koala theory time, legends. And this one's got just enough spice to make the paddock nervous. What if Oscar isn't planning to stay at McLando beyond this season? Now hear me out. If Oscar wants Pedro as his race engineer next year, timing matters. Because if Pedro was to take Snake's place this year, boom, gardening leave. And not the relaxing sit by the pool with a beer kind either. The proper corporate hostage version. Meaning Oscar could finally escape Snake Stallard, only to lose the bloke he actually wants on the radio. So from a strategic point of view, Oscar may simply be doing what Oscar does best, quietly suffering through the nonsense, keeping the radio chat to an absolute minimum, and playing the long game. Because really, what's one more year of tactical sabotage, baffling strategy calls, and emotionally draining "we're happy with P2" speeches when you've already survived 3? At this point, enduring McLando politics probably feels less like motorsport and more like a long-term psychological resilience program. So perhaps Oscar's current vibe isn't passive acceptance. Perhaps it's more, righto, one more year, don't punch anyone, then leave. No, he didn't actually say that, but I'll bet he's thinking it. Minimal interaction, maximum professionalism, eyes firmly on the exit sign. Because if there's one thing Oscar consistently does better than most of the grid, it's keeping his cool while surrounded by complete nonsense. And honestly, that would be the most Oscar move imaginable. Quietly tolerate the circus, collect the data, then politely disappear before the tent collapses. Dry, calculated, efficient. Very Aussie. Now, is this fact? No. Is it plausible? Absolutely. And frankly, after the strategic clownery we've seen so far, Papaya Koala wouldn't blame him one bit. Kimi wins. Lando P2. Oscar P3. Max somehow drags that thing from near last to P5 on ancient 51-lap hard tires after spinning on lap 1. Driver of the day, and honestly, Max deserved it. After the finish, Snake sounds oddly enthusiastic for someone whose strategy cost his driver the win. Well done. That is a really well-deserved podium. P3. Amazing. Then he adds, stay between 3 and 4. Excuse me? Did he mean to say that out loud? Because that sounds suspiciously like, know your place. Awkward. Meanwhile, Lando sounds furious. Yeah, well done. For F's sake, how did we not win this? Should have won, guys. Well, mate, you stayed out too long trying to disadvantage Oscar instead of racing Kimi. Congratulations. You undercut yourself. Stella, McLando's highly intelligent team principal and hostage to papaya politics, has done a bit of backpedaling on Oscar's weird qualifying issues. Originally, very suspicious. Now, after being reminded that his paycheck comes from the Church of Lando. Apparently it was just unpredictable conditions and power unit inconsistencies. The universal Formula One translation for, we absolutely do not want to explain why everything suddenly fell apart at the exact moment Oscar looked threatening. Importantly though, he still didn't blame Oscar. Which, by McLando standards, is practically emotional growth. Then Stella said, McLando performs best during race stints, not one-lap qualifying. If we're talking about Oscar, correct. The man is a race day menace. Calm, clinical, terrifyingly efficient. But for Lando, mate, Lando's entire internal team privilege package seems built around qualifying. Because somehow, qualifying ahead equals strategic dominion. If Lando qualifies ahead, he inherits. Strategy priority, pit stop protection, undercut control. And apparently Oscar's entire race strategy too. That's not letting them race. That's papaya monarchy. Here's a radical concept. How about championships get decided on Sundays instead of whoever gets crowned king on Saturday? Because right now, unpredictable conditions sounds an awful lot like, please stop noticing things. Bullshit excuses. Sometimes the weirdest thing in McLando isn't the strategy, it's the explanation. Then things get really strange. MBS, the FIA's El Presidente, personally hugs Kimi in Parc Fermé. Now maybe that means nothing. But after decades of watching F1, I genuinely cannot remember seeing him do that with any other driver. And given all the Arrow leniency lately, it's not exactly helping appearances, and casts even more suspicion on the heavily scripted history boy narrative. Then Max gets a 5-second penalty for crossing the pit exit line by approximately 3 atoms. Meanwhile, Charles cops 20 seconds, yes 20, originally for driving damaged, but they had to back down on that because George was driving with a wing so damaged it was pulling sparks off the ground. Then apparently for track limits. But that only carries a 5-second penalty, then lasting advantage, despite the fact he lost 3 positions. So what exactly was the penalty for? Papaya Koala suspects it's because Charles correctly but publicly criticized Kimi's dangerous driving and mysteriously suffered consequences. Not saying, just observing. But honestly, the biggest disappointment of Miami? No Lego race. That was genuinely the most entertaining thing last year. Which probably says more about modern F1 than any of us would like. Miami 2026 once again highlighted Formula One's growing problem. Fans are not blind. We can see the narrative manipulation, the inconsistent penalties, manufactured hype, strategic favoritism, and a product increasingly reliant on propaganda over performance. Oscar continues to shine despite the nonsense. Lando continues to benefit from extraordinary institutional support. Kimi continues to receive treatment usually reserved for state-sponsored assets. And Liberty continues to underestimate how intelligent F1 fans actually are. Formula One doesn't need more celebrities, more fake narratives, more history boy comparisons, more battery theater. It needs real racing. That is all. And until that returns, no amount of media spin will stop fans noticing that the Emperor has no racecraft. So what do you reckon, Koala Crew? Did Charles deserve 20 seconds? Is Snake actively sabotaging Oscar or merely catastrophically incompetent? Has Oscar finally stopped trusting the pit wall? And most importantly, how much longer can Liberty keep pretending fans aren't noticing? Chuck it in the comments. And if you made it this far, give the video a like. Subscribe if you haven't already. Join or buy me a coffee if you'd like to support more mildly unhinged but surprisingly detailed Formula Koala investigations. Because somebody's got to keep asking awkward questions. And unfortunately, that someone is a koala. Papaya Koala out.